Real bread doesn't need a chemistry degree. Flour, water, yeast, salt. 4 ingredients, and for thousands of years, that was enough. Now, walk into an American grocery store and pick up a loaf of sandwich bread. Flip it over. The ingredient list can run longer than the recipe itself, because that soft, perfectly sliced loaf sitting on your counter wasn't designed to go stale in a few days. It was designed to survive warehouses, trucks, supermarket shelves, and weeks of storage, and still feel soft when you squeeze the bag. And that changes everything. Dough conditioners, preservatives, industrial sweeteners, ingredients you've probably never heard of, quietly buried beneath the innocent-looking words 2% or less. None of this is a secret. It's right there on the label. Today, we're exposing 7 of America's biggest bread brands, breaking down exactly what they put inside every loaf and why those ingredients are there. Then we'll reveal 3 brands that are doing something surprisingly rare, making bread that actually looks like bread used to, and one of them may already be sitting in your kitchen. Brand number 7 is Oroweat country-style plain bread, and this one is the least offensive on the list, which is worth saying up front because not everything here is equally bad, and this video isn't interested in pretending otherwise. Oroweat markets itself as free from artificial colours, flavours and preservatives, and on paper the claim mostly holds up. The ingredient panel reads enriched wheat flour, water, sugar, yeast, soybean oil, sea salt, natural flavour, fermented wheat flour, wheat gluten, soy lecithin, citric acid, and whey. No DATEM, no calcium propionate, no mystery dough conditioner cluster buried 3 ingredients deep in a parenthetical nobody's supposed to read closely. The one catch is that vague line item, natural flavour. Legally, that phrase can describe almost anything derived from a natural source, and companies are never required to say what's actually inside it. It's not a red flag on its own, and it's genuinely the cleanest loaf in this half of the list. It's just a reminder that even the best of the mainstream white breads still isn't handing you the full picture. Brand number 6 is Nature's Harvest White, made with whole grain, and this is where the marketing starts working harder than the ingredients actually do. The name alone does a lot of lifting. Harvest, Nature's. It sounds like it came straight off a farm somewhere, packed by hand into a paper bag. Flip the bag over, and the first ingredient is enriched wheat flour. The same bleached, fortified white flour base used in nearly everything else on this list. Whole wheat flour doesn't show up until third, after water, which tells you it's a minor supporting player. Not the backbone of the loaf the name on the front is promising you. From there you get calcium sulfate, preservatives listed as calcium propionate and sorbic acid, soy flour, monoglycerides, DATEM, soy lecithin, and vitamin D3 tossed in on top of the enrichment package already covering that. This is a bread wearing a name built entirely around wholesomeness and open fields, and delivering a formulation that's functionally identical to the plain white sandwich bread sitting 3 feet away on the exact same shelf at a similar price. A quick aside, because you're going to see this one a lot for the rest of this list, DATEM stands for diacetyl tartaric acid esters of mono and diglycerides, and it's one of the most common dough conditioners in American commercial bread. Its job is to strengthen gluten so a loaf holds a tall, even shape after machine handling and a fast proof time. It's approved by the FDA and generally considered safe at the levels used in bread. So this isn't a health scare. It's a manufacturing shortcut, and once you know what it means on a label, you'll start noticing exactly how often it shows up on this list. Brand number 5 is Kroger White Sandwich Bread, the store's own private label, and this one earns its spot by doing exactly what a store brand is designed to do: hit the lowest possible production cost while still looking like real bread from across the aisle. The ingredients are enriched flour, water, sugar, yeast, and then a 2% or less section holding soybean oil, salt, sodium stearoyl lactylate, ammonium sulfate, calcium propionate, and fumaric acid. Sodium stearoyl lactylate is a dough strengthener and emulsifier that lets a bakery use cheaper, lower-protein flour and still get a tall, uniform, camera-ready loaf out the other end of the production line. Ammonium sulfate is yeast food, added because the dough needs to rise on an industrial production schedule measured in minutes, not the hours a traditional bakery would give it. None of this is technically secret. It's printed right there on the bag. It's just never mentioned anywhere near the price tag, which is the entire business model of a store brand in the first place. Brand number 4 is Great Value White Sandwich, Walmart's house brand, and the current label reads enriched wheat flour, water, sugar, yeast, soybean oil, salt, monoglycerides, calcium propionate, DATEM, calcium sulfate, soy lecithin, citric acid, grain vinegar, wheat gluten, potassium iodate, and monocalcium phosphate. That's 11 additional ingredients stacked on top of the 4 that should be doing all the actual work. DATEM and monoglycerides are both dough conditioners, quietly doing the job that a skilled baker's hands and a few extra hours of fermentation time would otherwise do for free. Great Value isn't hiding behind fancy branding or a heritage story or a farmhouse on the label. It's just cheap, and the ingredient panel shows you exactly where that rock-bottom price tag gets made up on the back end. One dough conditioner at a time. Potassium iodate, in particular, is a dough strengthener that's banned outright in the EU, UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand over concerns about excess iodine intake, though the FDA still classifies it as safe and permits it here in the amounts used in commercial baking. It's not marketed anywhere on the front of the bag for obvious reasons. Brand number 3 is Sara Lee Classic White, a name that has been sitting in American kitchens for generations, which is exactly why this one stings a little more than the store brands do. The label reads enriched wheat flour, water, sugar, yeast, calcium sulfate, soybean oil, salt, wheat gluten, preservatives listed as calcium propionate and sorbic acid, more enrichment additives, monoglycerides, DATEM, soy lecithin, ferrous sulfate, citric acid, grain vinegar, monocalcium phosphate, and sesame seeds. Sara Lee's marketing leans hard on nostalgia, on straight-from-the-bakery taste, on the idea that this is comfort food from a name your family has trusted for decades and generations before that. The ingredient list tells a very different story. A 19-item industrial formulation built for a 2-week shelf life, using almost the exact same dough conditioner toolkit as the anonymous store brands. It's supposedly a cut above, just dressed up in a warmer, more familiar name. The nostalgia is real. The ingredient list doesn't share much else with that image. Brand number 2 is Pepperidge Farm, Farmhouse Hearty White. And this is where the gap between price and substance gets the widest on this entire list. Pepperidge Farm charges a real premium for this loaf, built almost entirely on language like Farmhouse, since 1937, and the bread you would make if you made bread. For that premium, What you actually get is enriched wheat flour, water, sugar, yeast, salt, soybean, and canola oil, monoglycerides, calcium propionate, and sorbic acid, malted barley flour, whey, soy lecithin, DATEM, and wheat gluten, with some retailer listings also showing sodium stearoyl lactylate on top of that. That is functionally the same dough conditioner package as Great Value's bargain loaf, sitting near the bottom of this list, at several times the shelf price, wrapped in language that leans hard into homemade farmhouse kitchen imagery. The ingredient panel doesn't back that image up. You're buying the same industrial formula everyone else on this list is using, just with better branding and a founder's story printed across the bag. Per ounce, Farmhouse routinely costs noticeably more than Great Value, sitting a few shelves over, for a dough conditioner list that's nearly identical between the two. Brand number 1 is Wonder Bread Classic White, and it earns the top spot for one simple reason. It's the most trusted name in the entire category. The loaf that turned sliced sandwich bread into an American household staple. And it also carries the longest, most heavily engineered ingredient list of anyone here. Depending on the retailer and region, the sweetener is either sugar or high fructose corn syrup. Past that opening, the 2% or less section is genuinely long. Calcium carbonate, wheat gluten, soybean oil, salt, and then a line the label itself calls dough conditioners, which it discloses as containing one or more of the following: sodium stearoyl lactylate, calcium stearoyl lactylate, monoglycerides, mono and diglycerides, distilled monoglycerides, calcium peroxide, calcium iodate, DATEM, ethoxylated mono and diglycerides, and enzymes. 9 different named dough conditioners on the label, sitting under one umbrella term, more than double what most of the other entries on this list are naming individually. The bread then finishes with vinegar, monocalcium phosphate, citric acid, vitamin D3, soy lecithin, and calcium propionate to retard spoilage. This is the loaf that made Wonder a household name in the first place, and it's also the loaf on this entire list, carrying the most going on behind that name. So that's the 7. Before we get to the brands actually worth putting in your cart, if you've made it this far, drop a comment with which one of these 7 is currently sitting on your counter right now. I'm always curious how close to home a list like this actually hits for people. Now, here's the flip side, because this video isn't just here to make you feel bad about your sandwich for the rest of the week. There are still brands out there baking bread the way bread is supposed to be baked, and every single one of them is sitting in a normal grocery store, not some specialty shop across town you've never set foot in. Best option number 3 is Dave's Killer Bread, specifically their 21 whole grains and seeds loaf. This one actually has a long ingredient list, longer than some of the brands on the avoid side of this video. But the difference is what's actually on it: organic whole wheat, water, organic cane sugar, a whole grains and seeds mix built from real flax, sunflower seeds, tricolor quinoa, oats, barley, rye, millet, and a handful of other actual grains you could name off the top of your head: organic wheat gluten, organic oat fiber, yeast, organic molasses, sea salt, organic cultured wheat flour, organic vinegar, and organic acerola cherry powder for natural vitamin C instead of the synthetic version. Every single item on that list is something you could point to on a farm and name out loud without pulling out your phone. No DATEM anywhere on it. No calcium propionate. No dough conditioner cluster doing the work that real fermentation time is supposed to do instead. Dave's Killer Bread is USDA, Organic, Non-GMO Project Verified, and currently the best-selling organic bread in the entire country, which means this isn't some fringe health food pick you have to hunt down. It's sitting on the same shelf as Wonder and Sara Lee at your regular grocery store, usually for a couple dollars more a loaf. The brand's whole origin story is built around its founder turning his life around after prison and getting a second chance at the family bakery. And whatever you think of that as a marketing angle, it hasn't stopped the company from actually backing it up on the ingredient panel, which is more than you can say for most of the names higher up on this video's other list. Best option number 2 is Nature's Own Butterbread. Yes, the same Nature's Own that the brand's own sales data puts as the best-selling loaf bread in the country. The company quietly reformulated its recipe to strip out artificial preservatives, artificial colors, and artificial flavors entirely, and got the whole product line non-GMO Project verified in the process. The current label reads wheat flour, water, sugar, yeast, and then a short 2% or less section. Real butter made from milk. Cultured wheat flour, wheat gluten, salt. Flaxseed meal, vinegar, malted barley flour, enzymes, and acerola cherry powder. No DATEM, no calcium propionate, and no sorbic acid. No stearoyl, lactylate of any kind, calcium or sodium anywhere on the label. This is proof that a mainstream, mass-produced, gas station-available loaf of bread doesn't have to carry a dough conditioner cocktail just to survive the trip from the bakery to your kitchen table. The exact current formulation can shift slightly by region and by specific product line within the Nature's Own family, so it's worth a quick label check at your own store. But the direction here is real, and it's moving in the opposite direction from where Wonder Bread is sitting all the way at number 1 on the other list. Best option number 1 is Food for Life's Ezekiel 4-9 sprouted grain bread. Here is the entire ingredient list, all of it, nothing left off. Organic sprouted wheat, filtered water, organic sprouted barley, organic sprouted millet, organic malted barley, organic sprouted lentils, organic sprouted soybeans, organic sprouted spelt, organic wheat gluten, yeast, and sea salt. 11 ingredients, every single one recognizable, no added sugar anywhere in it, no added oil, no preservatives of any kind, and it isn't even made with flour in the traditional sense, because sprouting the grains first changes how your body actually breaks them down at a chemical level. You'll usually find it in the frozen section, not the shelf-stable bread aisle, and that's not a coincidence, it's a direct consequence. A loaf with nothing artificial keeping it fresh for 2 weeks at room temperature has to live in the freezer instead of the shelf. That's the trade-off real bread makes. And it's the exact trade-off. Every brand near the top of the avoid list has spent decades and a whole lot of food science engineering its way around. Here's what all of this actually adds up to. A can of beans should contain beans, water, and salt. A jar of sauce should contain tomatoes and seasoning, and a loaf of bread should contain flour, water, yeast, and salt. The same 4 things it's contained for thousands of years before industrial baking ever showed up. When the label runs longer than that, there's almost always a reason, and across this entire list, that reason was rarely your health specifically. It was shelf life. It was manufacturing cost. It was the safe, unspoken assumption made by every single brand on the avoid side of this video that you were never actually going to flip the bag over and read what's printed on the back in 8-point font. Remember the chemistry experiment from the start of this video. That's not an exaggeration thrown in purely for effect. It's a fairly literal, ingredient-by-ingredient description of what's happening in that 2% or less section on 7 of the 10 labels we just went through. And the regulatory picture around some of these additives is actually shifting right now, not 20 years ago. Texas signed a law in June 2025 that requires warning labels on any packaged food sold in the state, containing one of 44 additives, already restricted in the EU, UK, Canada or Australia. A list that includes azodicarbonamide and potassium bromate, 2 dough conditioners that show up in some American commercial bread, but haven't been allowed in EU baking in decades. That requirement starts applying to newly developed food labels on January 1st, 2027. It won't touch every ingredient on this list, and it doesn't ban anything nationally, but it's a sign that ingredients that have been sitting quietly in American bread for decades are finally getting a second look. Now you have, and that changes what you do the next time you're standing in that aisle with a loaf in each hand. So here's a 30-second test you can run right there before anything ends up in your cart. Flip the bag over first, before anything else, before the price, before the front of pack claims. If you see DATEM, calcium propionate, sorbic acid, or dough conditioners, parenthetical, with 4 or 5 chemical names stacked inside it, that loaf was built for a truck and a 2-week shelf life, not for your table. If the first ingredient is enriched wheat flour and whole grain doesn't show up until the 3rd or 4th spot on the list, the whole grain claim splashed across the front of the bag is doing more work than the actual bread inside it is. And if a brand is confident enough in its own ingredient list to print all of them, in a font you can actually read without squinting, the way Ezekiel does, and Nature's Own increasingly does, that's usually a brand with nothing left on the label to hide. One more thing worth checking while you're standing there. Count the total number of ingredients. Real bread tops out around 4 to 6. Once you cross into double digits, you're not looking at a recipe anymore, you're looking at a formula. If this changed which loaf you're reaching for the next time you're in that aisle, share it with whoever in your house actually does the grocery shopping. It's a 2-second flip of the bag, and it's the difference between buying bread and buying a shelf-life engineering project. And if you want to see this same breakdown run on another aisle you stopped questioning years ago, let me know in the comments what to open up next.